The Whistling Monsters by B. Wallis. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. The Whistling Monsters by B. Wallis. Part 1. Deegan groaned. He lay tightly trussed on the narrow strip of shingle beach that stretched from the placid, somber pool to the great cliff here, thrusting its vast bulk across the chasm, which hereafter continued simply as a gloomy, narrow cleft, riven possibly by some cyclopean convulsion of bygone eons. The man by his side made no response, and continued to stare at the opposite wall with increasing intensity, as though oblivious to the tight-drawn rawhide thongs which bound them both. With a scowl of irritation, Deegan painfully twitched his grizzled head to one side, and succeeded in catching a fleeting glimpse of Vance, his partner. "Well, what are you so quiet about?" he snarled. "What are you thinking about, anyway? When these blasted thongs dry out, you'll make enough noise, I'll gamble," he sneered, alluding to the fact that the Indians, with customary cruelty, had soaked the lashings, previous to the trussing, so that their captives might taste the tortures of hell for many fearful hours before death released them. Indeed, now and again a slight twist of lip or quiver of muscle already indicated that the thongs were contracting, and no more than an hour had passed since the two men had been brutally flung on the sharp-edged rubble. "Thinking about? Well, what would I be thinking about? Grand Opera or Einstein?" replied Vance, with no effort to conceal the contempt which for some while had been simmering within him. In so many ways had his partner fallen short of the clean-cut standard the college-bred man held as the unquestionable creed of good fellowship. "Reckon you were saying your prayers, or maybe worrying over having no pajamas," sneered Deegan with ponderous sarcasm, inwardly assured that the young fellow was flushing with resentment. Curiously, these two had come together and joined fortunes in this wild, crude country. Barely a month before, a few drinks in a garish saloon had afforded the only introduction the etiquette of the Guianas demanded. For 6 months, Dick Vance had manfully wrestled with the appalling accounts of a certain branch bank to which the influence and indifference of a wealthy uncle had banished him, when the crash following upon his father's sudden demise exposed the flimsy structure upon which the departed parent had built his reputation for probity and solidity. Straight from Harvard to this dreary slavery could have but one ending for such a spirited, athletic young fellow, and the inevitable happened. Moreover, Deegan required the 500, which constituted Vance's sole legacy from a father who had often thrown away more than this upon a single night's entertainment. Had it not been Deegan, then certainly some other and possibly more unsavory adventurer would have pulled the trigger which shot Vance from his desk into the savage wilds of the interior. From the first day's strenuous upstream paddling, the partnership had proved far more amicable, close association discovering a diversity of habit and temperament neither could bridge. The college man of cleanly habits and sensitive breeding held no point of kindred amity with the grizzled, illiterate partner, who had doggedly held his own since early boyhood in bitter warfare with the roughest of his kind and the rawest of implacable nature. In 100 trifling daily details, each jarred on the other and aroused his enmity, and indeed, had it not been that mutual welfare demanded the protection and aid of each other, their partnership would have been brief. However, this was impossible. Possessed of strong wills, neither had the slightest intention of abandoning the search for the gold, of whose presence in the distant range Deegan affirmed he had reliable testimony. And it was this range for which they were heading when disaster overtook them. Therefore, though entirely against their liking, they held together. To such a length had this intolerance of each other carried them that on every occasion when divergence of opinion was possible, a set course was adopted, only after a prolonged wrangle, and 24 hours back, on arriving at an outlying spur of their objective, they had decided to encamp and reconnoiter for a day or so. Even on such slight provocation they came into conflict, Vance preferring a space of almost clear and level ground, backed by a bluff and affording unbroken observation on all other sides, a practical and common-sense suggestion Deegan would naturally have adopted had Vance not unfortunately voiced his approval. Immediately Deegan had proffered bitter opposition, and in such matters the weight of years and experience prevailed against youth and inexperience, and it came about that their camp lay close to a strip of dense jungle sweeping from the level ground far up a steep slope between two outflung ridges. As dawn broke, the disaster occurred. Rushed by the wild Amaripas, a little-known and implacable savage people of the Upper Guiana, the two men were quickly overpowered before they had time to snap a trigger. Expecting, at the best, an instant and bloody ending, the captives were surprised to find themselves picked up quietly and borne shoulder-high by some half a dozen stalwart savages. An hour or so later, they had been silently flung onto the shingle beach, and after a hasty but very efficient tightening of the bonds, their captors had departed with barely a dozen words spoken. And in truth, Vance had noted that they appeared ill at ease and eyed the spot with alert glances of apprehension. End of Part 1.